Now, we've been discussing it a bit on the programme so far as well. Parents and children across the country are wondering when schools are going to reopen and how they can do so safely. Many will be concerned about whether to send their children back and also about the impact that lockdown is having on children's education, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Well, to talk about this, I'm pleased to say we're joined by the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, the schools regulator, Amanda Spielman. Thank you for being on the programme this morning. Now, there are reports in the newspapers this morning that primary school children could return as early as June. Is that something that you'd support?
Yeah, I think I've been heard, Sophie, saying that if you look at the interests of children, it's very clear that their interests are best served in the vast majority of cases by being back at school as soon as possible. Though, of course, that has to be weighed up with a great many issues for adults, for the staff in schools, for the healthcare system. But nevertheless, if we look at children, it is in their interests.
Working out which children should go back first, how to do it in a safe way is imperative, of course. And you can see different countries doing slightly different things. France prioritising nurseries and primary schools, Germany slightly older children. According to the reports today, it's primary schools in the UK that could be being looked at. Do you think it makes sense to target younger children?
There's a great deal of logic in targeting younger children. Of course, we know that making normality for children is really important. And the younger the child, the more they need that simple sort of structured routine where they understand what's happening. It's hard for them to go to school one day and then not for another 2 weeks. So I entirely recognise and see the logic of this. And I also think there's a logic from the point of view of parents. The youngest children are the ones who need the greatest sort of care and oversight. It's hardest for parents to work and do all the other things they need to do if they're also looking after perhaps several young children at the same time and trying to make sure they work through schoolwork remotely.
I guess the difficulty is that the younger children may also be those who find it hardest to socially distance. Many teaching unions are quite worried about the safety of their teachers. How difficult do you think it could be to socially distance in a school setting, and what kind of measures might be used to try and make sure that happens?
Well, this is, of course, is where we're in the hands of the health experts to tell us what is safe and how it can be organised. And I wouldn't want to second guess that for one moment. But what we do know, and it's very clear, there are encouraging signs coming out that children are both somewhat less susceptible, certainly to serious complications, and also seem to be less likely to transmit. So again, I can't second guess, but I'm quite sure that whatever decisions are being taken will fully take account of the medical and public health concerns here.
I mean, could you see, for example, children coming on alternate days or alternate weeks just to try and ease out the number of people in the classroom at once?
I think a lot of ideas about rotation are being discussed. As we can see from other countries, there doesn't seem to be sort of one obvious no-brainer answer.
OK. Now, one of the main challenges as well could be actually convincing parents that it's safe to send their children back to school. The polling in the papers today suggests many are actually opposing the idea of schools reopening still. How do you think the government is going to convince people that they should actually take advantage of the schools when they do reopen?
It's a really interesting balance we have here because, of course, the harm to children and to many children is largely invisible. Some children are living in really difficult circumstances where they're not looked after well, and those children aren't visible to most parents at the moment. They're not out on the streets, they're not in school, they're not in the playgrounds. And of course, there's the longer term invisible harm of the progressive loss of education, which we know is going to be contributing to widening gaps. The longer children stay out of school, the harder it is going to be to pull that together. So it's all about finding a way to help people understand the relative weight of the different factors here, I think. And of course, there are many anxieties about which people will need reassurance, and rightly so. Parents, teachers, other school staff, they do need that reassurance.
I mean, could you even fine parents who decide to keep their children away from school, as is the current situation now, or before coronavirus?
Well, given that there'd be substantial numbers of children in households where somebody is at high risk, I think it's extraordinarily unlikely that anybody would start at the stick end of the spectrum rather than the carrot. I mean, I'm fairly sure that we'll be running a sort of mixed economy of schooling for a while yet, with some children attending and some children learning as best they can remotely.
You were talking there about the kind of invisible impact of children not going to school, and I'm keen to talk about that a little bit more as well, because there are real concerns about educational inequality widening during the lockdown. I mean, not everyone's going to have parents who are homeschooling their children every day, or have the time to, or the ability to. How far back do you think progress could be set?
That's a really hard question to answer at this stage. You can do some sort of mathematical calculations and say it could be this, but the more important point is that we've got the certainty that children with special educational needs, children in households where it's difficult to get access to the equipment or to the bandwidth, children who are living in cramped households, and of course the children who just aren't very motivated. And most parents, or many parents, know that experience of having a child for whom everything is laid on, but you just can't persuade them to take it up and actually do it. So I think we should be really clear that we don't need to measure precisely which children are being disadvantaged. It's just very clear that a lot are.
There's also some very serious other impacts that children could be going through too. I mean, we know, for example, that calls to domestic abuse helplines have gone up. Children, so often the victims in these really upsetting cases as well. Is this something that you're concerned about too?
Absolutely, it is. And we also know that the schools make most referrals to local authority and other services of various kinds. Obviously, because most children aren't in school, those referrals aren't happening. Numbers are down dramatically. So many children are not being referred to or not getting services that they absolutely need. There's a backlog building up. And much of that really needs addressing as fast as possible. And also, children aren't getting the exercise. They're not getting the sort of wider cultural benefit of after school activities. There are many things beyond not just getting the core academic subjects that are accumulating here.
I was interested to listen to your evidence to the Select Committee earlier on in the week, and I just wondered if we could pick up a little bit on something that you talked about whether or not Ofsted should be judging schools on how they perform during the lockdown. Because for many people, they'll be seeing some schools doing very well and setting lots of virtual homework and catching up with children and making sure parents have got the support they need, and other schools falling behind. And this could be absolutely critical. Is it not Ofsted's job to make sure that schools are stepping up?
Well, we've been really clear. Routine inspection is suspended at the moment at the Secretary of State's request. And when the vast majority of schools have no more than a handful of children attending, that I think is absolutely sensible and right. We don't have a mandate to look at the remote work that schools are setting. And indeed, the guidance that's been put out by government makes very clear that schools are not required to teach online. So it'd be very odd for us to go out and say, you're not doing this well enough, or you're not doing enough of it, at the point that schools have been told you don't have to do it. That would really create, I think, many problems for the system.
It might create problems for the system, but at a time when, as we've discussed, there are real concerns about disadvantaged children falling behind, is it not something you should be looking at?
Well, I think the vast majority of schools are putting a great deal of effort both into assembling packages of remote learning, whether it's direct online lessons, whether it's access to some of the excellent resources that have been put together for online use, like BBC Bitesize, Oak Online, Oak National Academy. There's a great deal happening, but all of that is still not going to add up to a full education for children, and it is not going to prevent the gaps widening. So yes, schools can and should be doing what they can, but no, it would be wrong for us to be going around trying to judge that in the absence of any sort of clear expectation. I would like to see us get to a clear expectation of what during what it now seems clear is going to be a longer period of lockdown, every parent can and should expect of a school. But I don't think that's going to be simply have every teacher in front of a camera every day.
OK, and just finally, I'm sure many of our viewers are going to be grappling with homeschooling their children, trying to get their heads around Pythagoras, trying to motivate their disinterested children to pay attention to mum and dad. Have you got any tips?
It's a real toughie. Vary it. but provide structure and routine. Remember, that's part of how schools do. Schools do the magic that they do is to give children that structure that helps to motivate children and get them through learning, which is of course hard.
Yeah, I think perhaps lots of parents having a newfound respect for teachers. Thank you very much for being on the programme today.
Thank you.